Petersburg, Virginia is one of the most historic towns in the United States. It has been witness to it all, from Native American history through the Revolutionary and Civil Wars to the Civil Rights Movement. The city has been visited by heroes like Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr., as well as villains like Benedict Arnold and Aaron Burr. If these homes and buildings could speak, they would tell a story of both triumph and tragedy.
Isn't it interesting that we often don't appreciate things until they're gone? It could be something simple like a childhood toy or our first car, or maybe something more important like a lost loved one. But it seems to be human nature not to appreciate things until they're gone. This is the story of three lost treasures in Petersburg, buildings that are no more. And it serves to teach us about our obligation to preserve the existing architecture and history for future generations.
The founding of the settlement on the south side of the Appomattox River in the 1630s, followed by the building of Fort Henry in the 1640s, and the initial planning for the city of Petersburg by William Byrd II in the 1730s, were all based on one geographical reality, the presence of the falls of the Appomattox River. The falls mark the farthest point upriver that waterborne transportation could reach, making Petersburg a hub of exchange. From the earliest days of English settlement, navigation on the Appomattox supported extensive commercial activity. Ocean-going ships, normally of about 70 tons, docked in the Petersburg harbor to carry the cargo sent there by planters in surrounding regions. Between 1730 and 1842, approximately 21 tobacco warehouses were built in Petersburg. By the 1820s, canals along the river enabled points west of the falls to send agricultural products to Petersburg on canal boats called bateaux, making the Upper Appomattox Canal one of the most important canals in the United States. The first steamboat arrived in Petersburg Harbor in 1819, and in 1858 the 700-ton Southern Star entered the Petersburg Harbor. It was the largest steamboat to dock in Petersburg. By 1850, most of Petersburg's boatmen were free blacks, and some owned their own vessels. Joseph Jenkins Roberts went from being a boatman to becoming the first president of the nation of Liberia in Africa. The current Petersburg City Hall, at the corner of West Tab and North Union Streets, was built by the federal government in 1858 as a customs house and post office. The large size of the customs house reflects the size of Petersburg's extensive trade. However, by 1917, most freight carried by water landed at City Point to the east of Petersburg, where the Appomattox enters the James, and then was forwarded by rail to Petersburg. The Petersburg Harbor flourished into the 1920s and 1930s. Today, though, there is little physical evidence of the once vibrant commercial activity that emanated from the harbor and port of Petersburg for 3 centuries.
When you think about famous harbors in the state of Virginia, your mind is drawn further to the east of us, Portsmouth and Norfolk. If you know a lot about the Civil War, you'll think a lot about City Point, which during the 1860s was one of the busiest harbors in the world. One of the cities you don't think about probably is Petersburg, which was a very busy port in the 1800s and a supply line for the Commonwealth and the rest of the South. What was there in the 1800s is no longer there. It's been lost to time and decay. It is another lost treasure in the city of Petersburg.
Golden Ball Tavern. With Petersburg at the center of trade on the Appomattox, warehouses were built up and down the river, the most famous being the Golden Ball. Built in 1760, 16 years before the Declaration of Independence, the Golden Ball housed the largest tobacco exporting business in the country. It was owned by Richard Hanson, a British loyalist. In May of 1776, when the rest of Virginia held a fast in memory of the Boston Harbor closure, Hanson decided to host a feast. His brazen act caused him to flee to England shortly thereafter. When the British captured Petersburg in 1781, the Golden Ball became lodging for British officers. After Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown, the building was turned into a tavern. In 1784, the Virginia General Assembly established the Tavern as a meeting place of the courts and the Common Council. It is believed that the original tavern was burned or torn down in the 1850s, and a bigger tavern was built in its place. The last structure was demolished in 1944, and since then the property has been used as a parking lot.
We're here at the corner of Market and Old Street in Old Town Petersburg, where once sat the Golden Ball Tavern. Golden Ball Tavern was a Revolutionary War, colonial era tavern. It was the seat of commerce and activity in Old Town Petersburg. Today, the Historic Petersburg Foundation owns this site, and there's been talk about, if we get the right investors, rebuilding the tavern to its once glory.
Underground Railroad House on Pocahontas Island. By the 1860s, Petersburg had the largest black population in the country, and its peninsula, Pocahontas Island, had the oldest free black residential community in the nation. This, along with the canal system, made Petersburg an epicenter of enslaved people seeking freedom on the Underground Railroad.
Where we are sitting right now is the main thoroughfare from the Underground Railroad. See, you must have to understand what was the route of the Underground Railroad. The route of the Underground Railroad from the Everglades, Dismal Swamps, and riverways and so forth and so on. It was where your major plantations were. Your slaves would run away and they would follow the rivers and the waterways this way. And they believed if you went north and keep your eyes on the east, that God would take you to the promised land. That's what they believed. In this area, they had Quakers. Quakers lived in, this was Denver County, and Quakers lived in this area, and they didn't believe in slavery, and they didn't believe in war. So with a lot of them mixed up, people of all colors lived together here. They were instrumental and helped operating the Underground Railroad through the Appomattox River.
Many houses in both the South and the North claim to have been a part of the Underground Railroad because of unusual or hidden rooms. These claims are so frequent that scholars are skeptical of most. By nature, the Underground Road was a secret, and thus verifying actual stops is difficult at best. However, one home on Pocahontas Island has a strong claim to be in an Underground Railroad stop.
Well, the Underground Railroad house that was lost about 4 or 5 months ago, it was a treasure. It was a treasure. It was one of the oldest houses on the island. And dealing with Underground Railroad, that was one of the houses, main houses, because it had a cellar in it versus other houses around here. You had them beneath the ground, but we couldn't hide them above the ground. So that was a significant thing about that house. It had 3 layers. It had the top, the middle layer, and it had the third one, the cellar. If you look at the house, you would never know that it had a basement in it, because well camouflaged. Even that house was part of the war, what they call it, Civil War also. There was a lot of prominent whites in Petersburg that were afraid of shelling. They hid them in that house. Because of the cellar they had in there, you could have a cellar, you had a fireplace, you could live down there, and nobody never know you lived down there. That's the thing. You could put the slaves down there, and they could live down there and camouflage down there. If it was time for us to take them some other place and by a river or something and carry them north on the Underground Railroad. That's what that house is.
We know that Pocahontas Island was a famous stop on the Underground Railroad because of a publication in 1872 by William Still, which is packed with references to enslaved people fleeing through Petersburg. There was also the famous Kaziah Affair in 1858.
Kaziah Affair had to do with where our culture is. See, this man communicated with waiters and waitresses and all this kind of stuff in the hotels around here. And he had worked up a deal. and how to take them out of here, the slaves out of here. But what had happened, he ran upon a sandbar, his ship, and it couldn't move. So when the authority went down there and inspected, they found slaves hidden in the Kaziah, and that's how they got him. And they all this white guy threatened to lynch him and everything. But they gave him time in jail, about 5, 6, 10 years. He was sentenced to prison for trying to help slaves out of here in the Underground Railroad to his ship.
Welcome to Pocahontas Island, just outside of downtown Petersburg. This is the oldest free black community in the United States and was a hotbed of activity during the Underground Railroad in the antebellum South. We're standing in front of the Joseph Jenkins Roberts house. He was the first president of the African nation of Liberia. But what we're really here to talk about is something you can't see today. It is a house that was part of the Underground Railroad that was torn down last year because the city gave the owner an ultimatum of fix up the home or tear it down. And unfortunately she chose to tear it down. And so what you'll see now is an empty lot of where the Underground Railroad house used to be in Petersburg, a lost treasure.
Martin Luther King House. Few people know that Petersburg was the center of the civil rights movement in Virginia. Martin Luther King Jr. visited Petersburg on numerous occasions, and the March on Washington was supposed to start on these very streets. When King came to Petersburg, he stayed at what has become known as the Martin Luther King Safe House.
So thanks for watching our video. We're ending here in front of the Martin Luther King Safe House here on Harrison Street. This property is not a lost treasure yet, but you can see it's in disrepair, and there's other properties like this in the city that need to be taken care of for future generations. So what can you do? Well, one of the things that you can do is donate to Historic Petersburg Foundation to help us renovate and stabilize properties such as this. You can volunteer. We need all kind of different disciplines, accounting and web design and graphic design. All those things can help us with our mission. Lastly, you can move to Petersburg. And if you haven't picked up from this video, this is a pretty great place to live. It's beautiful. It's got architecturally and historically significant homes for sale for relatively cheap. It's also just 30 miles from Richmond, the juncture of 2 interstates, beautiful river, lots of great restaurants. So come on down and become a part of our story.